Hello and welcome to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. And I'm so excited to be with you. I'm Alfred Edmund Jr., co-host of the show, and we have a very special guest co-host, the Honorable Reverend Dr. Suzanne Johnson Cook, also known as Ambassador or Dr. Sujay. She's been a guest on the show, and we're just happy to have her on, flying co-pilot with me for this segment.
I have a great co-pilot. I am excited to be here with you. I always want to be lifted, and I want to be one who helps lift. And so I'm here to be your co-pilot today, and we're going to fly and soar. I'm excited about it.
Listen, you've been a guest on the show, and we could do a whole series of shows on everything that you've done as a U.S. ambassador of international religious freedom, as a pastor and church founder. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and we'll probably learn more as we go. But today we're going to be talking about wealth creation with a couple of founders of a very legendary insurance brand. But what do you talk about when we talk about abundant life and wealth creation? What does that bring to mind for you?
Well, I was born into a family that had both. I was born into a Christian family, and my late parents started a business in our home when I was 6 years old, which is now the longest running Black family-owned business in New York City now, 63 years. And so all of that comes together, that you can have abundant life. And one of the ways to have wealth creation is to start a business, a Black-owned business. So we used to say BYOB was bring your own bottle back in the day. Now it's build your own business. And so I grew up with abundant life, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, listen, we're ready to go. We're primed for our guests. Again, this is Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. We'll be right back with our very, very special guest for today's show. Welcome to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmund Jr. with our special guest co-host, Ambassador Sujay. You may hear me call her Dr. Sujay, Ambassador Sujay. We could do Pastor Sujay, CEO Sujay. We could go all over the place, but we have a very, very special thank you for being here, Dr. Sujay. And listen,
it's my honor to be with you, co-hosting, and to be here for Gwen Franklin, who's put all of this together. She's got it going on, as I say.
Yeah, props to the founder of Be Lifted Up Radio, and
yes,
and does great work all the way around. We could talk about her forever too, but we won't do that. But listen, we got a great topic and some great guests. I mean, we're talking about life insurance, the wealth gap, AI, and we're also talking about co-founders of an important company, a business that also has a legacy with a legendary insurance brand. And we're talking about Mammoth Life and Reinsurance Company, who has an origin that we'll get into later with a legendary company called Mammoth Life and Accident Insurance Company. We'll bring him in, but one is Paul Ford, who's the CEO and one of the co-founders. The other is Bryan Simms, Chief Commercial Officer. And they are here really talking about how we accelerate the legacy and accelerate the need to close the wealth gap in America through these financial companies, and in this case, their financial company. Listen, let's welcome to the show right away, without further ado, Bryan and Paul. Come on in, guys.
Excited to have them and to have this topic. It's so important because so many families particularly don't want to talk about it. And, there is a reality. We're born and we will have death. And in between you have life, and you've got to prepare for all of it. So we're excited for you. You said two words today, legendary and legacy. And we want to talk about that. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Listen, guys, I want to jump in with a little bit of the history, and I'm kind of leaning into it because in my other life, I'm an executive and senior vice president at Black Enterprise, been there for 37 years. And when I first got hired as a junior editor those years ago, one of my assignments was to cover the Black-owned life insurance companies. It was enough to have a whole list separate and apart that we can track. You'll go through some of the changes that have happened since then. But I remember covering Mammoth Life and Accident Insurance Company and what that meant to the community back then. But bring us forward to what's happening with the new company, Mammoth Life and Reinsurance Company, in your individual journeys to becoming co-founders of this new entity, kind of carrying on this legacy, but in a very different way.
And I love the word reassurance. That's so important. So please help us. Bryan, welcome. And Paul, welcome.
Thank you. I'll take a crack at that one. And I'll start by telling you what Mammoth's up to, by telling you where we come from.
Okay, that's great.
So if you, at the turn of the 20th century, there was a need in communities of color, and we'll just broadly describe them as underserved communities, for financial services product. Again, a broad term. We can specify life insurance, we can specify a whole range of services that were not available to communities of color that they had to learn how to provide for themselves. Life insurance is one of those products that we had to create for ourselves within our communities, because traditional underwriters of life insurance product would purposefully underwrite against our lives. There's actually published research, which I think all of you will find very interesting. I found it shocking. Published research by one of the largest carriers on the planet that valued the life of people of color at exactly 1/3 that of majority culture. Which means that if we were worth 1/3, then our premiums were 3 times higher, which is a natural gate to buying financial services product and security that was bought by that product. So that landscape being in place, what happened was a wonderful mind meld of captains of industry in places like Tulsa and Boston and Atlanta and DC and Los Angeles, wherever these what we call now Black Wall Streets popped up. There was a mind meld between the captains of industry who had made significant money and churches, faith-based institutions, who were the kind of arbiter of advice, if you will, in the community. If your pastor said do it, then you do it.
Yes.
So the two of those unlikely partners got together to form the first self-help societies. And those self-help societies, in a nutshell, were simply aggregations of capital that allowed the association to provide what was called a 15-cent policy. For 15 cents every single week, an agent would go by house and collect. Yes. You would have insurance against a loss of a weekly paycheck, which for people at the turn of the century was disastrous. That was the beginnings of life insurance, credit insurance, mortgage insurance, basic insurance policies for people of color in underserved communities.
So we were considered 3/5 of a man for so long, or 3/5 of a person, and then 1/3 for our life insurance. So we were fractionally considered, but I remember Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, the late Dr. Wyatt T. Walker. He was pastor of Canaan Baptist Church, and 2 things he did. He went around selling the Negro Encyclopedia back then. And then he also made sure congregations started doing what you said. He was a pastor with a lot of impact and influence, but began to put their money into life insurance and on credit union. They created credit union churches to hold their money to help them. So I thank you for that history.
So if I fast forward, Dr. CJ, to the mid-20th century, there were probably right around 40 of these Black-owned insurance companies that provided significant service and coverage for our communities, the largest of which were Atlanta Life and North Carolina Mutual.
Yes.
North Carolina Mutual was unique in that 40% at the turn of the 20th century, not 21st century, 20th century, 40% of their agency force was women. Very interesting statistic, and they were the most successful of all of the 40-odd Black-owned insurance companies that we've researched. Wow. So if we fast forward to today, 0 of those companies that we mentioned, that we researched, none of them exist. Wow. The last 2 of them to go out of business were Atlanta Life, which the remnants of which were scooped up by Magic Johnson and his insurance company, Equitrust.
Okay.
And Mammoth Life and Reinsurance, which Paul and I founded.
Nice.
We're the only 2 tequila bottles on the shelf, if you will, today. And that's as a result of some fairly typical dynamics in the market, the first of which being access to capital.
Yes.
There's no romance without finance. And none of these companies had access to significant amounts of capital that it takes in a life insurance business, being a carrier, very capital intensive business, needs lots of money, cash sitting around. They ran out of access to cash. That's the best case of them. The worst case of them is that there was financial malfeasance in the mix. One of those companies, now this is not exaggeration for emphasis, but actually specific, had a $100 million hole in their balance sheet because one of their one of the managers that they hired to steward their funds, their reserve funds, took off to another country and took $100 million of their money.
Oh my goodness.
That's exactly right. So that's the worst example. That company now is in liquidation, so controlled by the state in which it domiciled, and no longer in business, and can never go back to being in business.
Wow.
So I'll leave. That's the backstory to all of Mammoth's existence. Okay, Mammoth.
It's an important story, though. Yeah.
It's a very important story that never gets told. Mammoth is the Louisville, Kentucky version. Mammoth Life and Accident is the Louisville, Kentucky version of that Black-owned insurance company. Founded there, we chose that name because Paul is a resident of Louisville, has ensconced himself in the community, and lives very close to the Mammoth Caverns, for which Mammoth was named.
Right.
So I'll stop with that piece right there, and I'll connect some dots for you from the historical story to how Paul and I got involved with it.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue as we get ready for our next segment, because you laid out where we've been as a people and as an industry, and I do want you to, as we do the show, obviously it's a show that focuses on faith and finance and business, to talk about this connection, not just in the business community but in general, of how important these insurance companies were to the communities that they served. I'm thinking of A.G. Gaston in Birmingham, Alabama, and that it was literally an economic life force for the Black community and the civil rights movement in Birmingham. But yeah, let's wrap this segment up. You're listening to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. We got a great layout of the journey, the challenge, and where we are today, and what Bryan and Paul and Mammoth Life and Reinsurance Company are doing as we move forward on this journey of abundant living. We'll be right back. You're living to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life.
See you in a few.
Welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm your co-host, Alfred Edmond Jr., and I'm here with the one and only Dr. Sujay. Dr. Sujay, you really, and during the course of your journey, have, like you said, a legacy under business ownership and entrepreneurship, as well as faith leadership. And you've played so many roles where you've had a foot in both worlds and have been the bridge between those worlds. But talk to me about what you think we've heard so far about the significance of what these gentlemen are doing right now.
Well, first of all, it's fascinating, and I commend you for the legacy, the legendary work that you're doing. I was fascinated because I call myself a Fed. I'm a faith leader, an entrepreneur, and a diplomat. And so I walk in all those worlds. So I was fascinated about the role of the church, which was really part of the civil rights movement, the life insurance movement, really where our wealth information began. So I wanted to pick up because I know that Paul, you're in Louisville. A good friend of mine, Reverend Kevin Cosby, is there doing a lot for the community. So I wanted to know right now what the church community is doing, the role and that it plays with life insurance and reassurance.
Sure. A great question, and you're right to point it out. One of the things that has been, one of the failed enterprises of modern insurance has been most of the traditional insurance companies that exist today. They really struggle to get after and serve the audiences that look like us. And it's because there was a decoupling of life insurance companies and their agents that were a part of communities who would mingle, network, socialize, and they were anchored around their faith. And quite frankly, were faith-based communities anchored by the church. So today, modern insurers, they really struggle to reach communities of color because they kind of miss that step of, well, who do we have that's embedded within the community at faith-based institutions? So that's one of the things that we felt we were serving as another beacon and stalwart to plug that gap was let's revisit that, let's revise that, and let's modernize and digitize that. So if you look around at many faith-based organizations, they're all budget strapped. They're all looking for ways to make the dollar stretch further. And there's nothing that makes the dollar go further today than technology and generative AI and things of that nature. So now you see the higher adopted use cases of how do you do better marketing and outreach to communities and involve them in things and do things online and digital. You see that starting to take place in a very big way with faith-based organizations. But we also orient our agents and the way that we distribute and sell life insurance around that premise too. So our agents
I love
are trained.
the word, digitized, because I have 2 adult sons, and we were, together for Mother's Day and my birthday and some other occasions. And I was saying, here are where my papers are, life insurance. This. And he says, well, do you have it digital? And I was like,
Right.
That's a really good idea, because I grew up in a world that was pre-computer, pre-digital. And so what are you helping families who are signing up for your life insurance? Is that one of the things you recommend, like right away? Don't only show your family where your papers are, but show them where they are digitally.
100%. This goes back to how we train the agents that we work with and the agencies. We want them to bring those solutions as they build relationships within the communities and families like yours to say, hey, there's a better way to do things. Let's digitize, the things that matter to protect your family first. And part of our sales approach and the way that we move life insurance is, let's figure out what you need. Do you have insurance? Do you have a burial plan? Do you have a will? Do you have an estate plan? And if you don't, we have tools that can move that into a digital format and take care of that and check the box to help them understand what they're securing as they look for a life insurance solution.
So in many ways, what we're saying, and I'm reminded of what we talk about at Black Enterprise all the time, that the mission hasn't changed, but how we accomplish that mission has to change.
Right.
Up until about 2016, and we're still best known for a print magazine that we haven't printed in nearly a decade. And just the way we don't print vinyl records anymore, it doesn't mean music is not being sold anymore. It's just that we're serving the mission using today's technology in a different way. Talk to me about today's Mammoth and where it's going, which as Dr. Sujay, just expressed, is different from how it was done then to now, and what that means for both the economic success and viability of your company, but also your effectiveness in this larger challenge that we are facing in the 21st century of closing the wealth gap in Black America.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds of context before I let Paul hop in here, because this is important for this conversation. It's not something my partner will hang his hat on, but I'm going to do it for him. So 10 years ago, Paul actually architected the very first platform, technology platform that used big data and traditional data science, analytics, and tools to help traditional carriers better understand mortality and morbidity risk.
Wow.
Okay, so where traditional carriers use 5 criteria to underwrite today, Paul's platform was using hundreds of thousands and billions of sets of data to choose from in order to help these carriers understand that what they viewed as bad risk before may not be bad risk. This was the precursor to digital issuance like Ethos that you see out here now. Paul's platform, and on that platform, he actually created the very first instant issue $2 million policy.
Wow.
Right. So it's important for the context of that question that you just asked. Paul is one of the few people on the planet that can talk about where it was and where it is and where it can go and where we can take it, because we've been in it for about a decade. We've been building these things for a decade. So Paul, go ahead. I'm sorry, I had to brag on you a little bit.
No, thank you.
Paul, you
I
were
want
smart
to put my applause sign up.
Yeah, Paul, you were smart to bring your own hype man to the show.
Right. So one of the things we touched on earlier is there was an older way of doing things to accomplish mission. How do you do that today? So that looks like making sure that really the idea of generational wealth means that families can actually experience that. Typically, what happened back in the day, if someone was getting their weekly paycheck and something happened to that breadwinner of the family, they were set back for a couple generations.
Yes.
That's still the case today. So home ownership is getting further out of reach for many people. If something happens to them or they have to switch their career path, there's so many different things that happen. We're just committed to getting the message out through the work that we do, that through life insurance and through home ownership and through the use of financial service tools and products, you can start to build your own ladder towards generational wealth, whatever that means for you. It doesn't have to be billions for someone. It doesn't have to be millions for someone. It may mean the family gets to start their own first business. It may mean that not just one, but maybe 3 to 4 to 5 of the grandkids all go to college or a trade school and become a professional. It can mean a variety of things for different people, but we're committed to doing that and focusing on bridging this gap of building communities of agents that are natural within the communities of color, but they're also the professionals that people can rely on. But that means going places that other traditional carriers won't go or don't go or think that it's been a bad risk in the past. And that typically starts with faith-based institutions because it is so meaningful there, and there's relationships and trust built there as well.
So I'm interested, with 40% having been agents before of women, I'm interested in women's empowerment. How many women are part of your particular life insurance company?
We tend to see this pretty similar, the same kind of stats play out for us as well. And the natural audiences that tend to come and work with us and alongside us distributing policies and getting them out there and interacting with communities, it typically looks like people of color, women, and veterans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? So when you think about who might need insurance, it gets no better than that in terms of having someone that looks like you or can build rapport, understand your needs. But one of the things that we would tell our insurance carrier partners and reinsurance partners as well, when they're all, butting their heads against the wall, trying to figure out how do we get to that audience of the other half of America that does not have life insurance or they're severely underinsured, how do we reach them? Well, we have to let them know, you know what, as we're sitting around their board table,
yes,
you live in a neighborhood, correct? They go, yeah, of course. Okay. Are there people of color in your neighborhood? Yes. Okay. You make good money. So do they.
Yes.
There's nothing that really happens there, but
we want to hear the rest of that answer.
Yeah.
Let's hold that thought, because I want to jump on two things. One,
sure.
You already touched on this idea of job creation among populations that understand the market you're serving. And I also want to talk about, as we're talking about the larger challenge, the big, giant, hairy challenge of closing the wealth gap, the importance of people understanding not only creation of wealth, which is the journey we've been on, but preservation and transitioning of wealth to future generations. Listen, everybody, you're listening to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. with our guest host, Dr. Sujay, and the co-founders of Mammoth Life and Reinsurance Company. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. with our guest host, Ambassador Sujay, and we are here with Paul Ford and Bryan Simms, the co-founders of Mammoth Life and Reinsurance Company. Listen, let's talk about a couple things. One, you touched on it in the last segment about these companies traditionally and today being a great job creation mechanism for people who really can relate, live in those communities, work in those communities. You talked about obviously women, veterans, and others, but that's an important role that Black business has traditionally played in our communities. But also the idea of insurance as a wealth creation tool,
yes,
a wealth preservation tool, and most importantly, as we talk about multi-generational wealth, transferring that wealth to future generations. Either one, you guys, kick it off.
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of lead off with this thought. This is how Bryan and I lead and organize the efforts of the company. We know that large global companies like a Starbucks and a Walmart, the McDonald's of the world, they all plan multiple years in the future for where they put their stores. It's based on where economic prosperity is planned, right? So a lot of the work that we do, we understand that communities of color are typically underserved. They don't quite understand how life insurance can benefit them and their community, but that's how we model. So we understand when we focus on very specific communities, and we can sell, X number of insurance policies. Maybe those are term policies that, are $100,000 a face amount. That doesn't cost a lot. And if you are able to get that done and focus your energy on certain communities, the way the mortality curves work, that means effectively when people do start to pass and these benefits hit their family, this is a lot of wealth that enters into a community that maybe doesn't have a Starbucks today or a Walmart or even a grocery store, but this starts to transform the geography and the landscape of how business is done and what jobs come into those communities. We can only do what we can do, but we know that we're able to set up agents, train agents as professionals. And these are professionals that have to be licensed by the state, just like a doctor or anyone else would have to get licensed to be a professional, but they're actually professionally trained to handle the concepts of life insurance and financial services. And these are career paths that we offer individuals that can lead to 6-7 figure career paths on our own that we get really excited about.
So what does the profile look like for someone who you would hire? What do they need to have to come in and be hired by you?
You would think that it would be like the world's greatest salesperson, when in fact it's actually the world's greatest and most empathetic person in the community, right? So seeing a former teacher, someone that was retired from working at a school district, someone that maybe was in real estate before, it's all kinds that it takes to get the job done, but typically someone that's very curious, someone that loves solving problems and helping people, and being involved in the community when no one really asks them. So whether that's coaching, whether that's mentoring, whether that's sitting on nonprofit boards, helping at the food kitchen, those are the kinds of mindsets and individuals where once they understand you can get paid handsomely for solving these problems, while also helping people build generational wealth in a really equitable, fair, reasonable way. It's really a great mix, if that makes any sense.
One of the sweet spots of this integration between, again, in this case, a community focus insurance business and a faith orientation is this idea of service. That if you have people with a service orientation do well in this kind of environment. In fact, again, for Black Enterprise in particular, I've interviewed lots of executives and professionals in the insurance industry and in the financial services industry as a whole. The biggest change that has happened between, let's say, the mid 20th century and the 21st century is that in the mid 20th century, it was all about statistics and metrics and numbers and analytics. But the people skills of the financial services industry, even outside the Black community, was horrible. It was like, these are these numbers, this is what we recommend, and do what you're going to do. And what the financial services industry has learned in general, but that the Black insurance, the Black financial services companies understood instinctively, it's like, what was the old Maya Angelou quote? People remember how you make them feel.
Yes.
And the idea now, people skills are the most important skills to have in the financial services industry in general, and in the insurance profession in particular, and in the Black community in particular. Because like we can teach you the technical stuff, we can't teach you to actually care. Bryan, you want to jump in on to actually care about the people you're serving?
Yes.
Like I had, and that resonates with me deeply. I spent 25 years of my career as a private banker, working for places like JP Morgan and Lazard, all of these white shoe, blue blood investment banks in Wall Street, where I got an opportunity to see how the wealthiest families in this country manage their money. It's not hard. It's not hard. It's very basic, conceptual, and they're actually products that are designed for them to fulfill those. So to your point, Alfred, the financial services industry hasn't had to care because the math was actually, according to, for rich folks, the math and the product set matched. The problem is the product set for middle class people and poor folks don't match the aspiration. And that's where we're trying to close the gap, because we can contribute to the development of communities in two ways. We see two major ways. One is the way by creating community in conjunction with others, where we can actually provide hiring and help people create their own wealth. The second is by taking advantage of the single largest decision that any insurance company has to make, which is, what do you do with your reserves? What do you do with your profits? Traditionally, Black insurance companies have been the biggest lenders in their communities, real estate and business lending. They've been the owners of the biggest banks in town. They've been the biggest investors in, well, what is now called affordable housing, but back then it was just basic housing. But all of those kinds of things are ways that we can accelerate the closing of this wealth inequality gap, not income inequality gap, but wealth inequality gap, which is very easily measurable. Death benefit and economic impact, which numbers are attached to that, compared to today, compared to what it will be 5 years from now when we're done with our work, or we're well on the way with our work.
I have a question for you. With people living longer now, what is a good age? What age is too late, or is there not a too late age? If you haven't had life insurance yet.
Yeah, there's really not an age that's too late, but the healthier you are, which typically means the younger you are, that's typically the best place to get insurance and lock it in and have it work the longest for you. The concept of compounding also works within the concept of some insurance products, but that's really it. As soon as it comes to mind, that's probably the time to start to kind of go after it. Earlier the better.
We're having conversations now about death. People used to be afraid of talking about death in our communities. You're going to die. So now people are like, yeah, let's put our money where our lives are. And I think have you there is like so important. Alfred, I'm sorry.
Not a problem. I'm saying that's the perfect segue into our next segment as we talk about the future. And when we talk about the future, not just the future of your company, but future generations. Dr. Sujay, you just said it. If we get these conversations started earlier in people's lives, the more successful they will be, the more wealth they can build over time. Listen, this is Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. Stick with us. We will be right back. Hello and welcome back to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. We've been having a powerful conversation, our guest host, Dr. Sujay, and I, with the co-founders of Mammoth Life and Reinsurance Company, kind of the phoenix from the ashes of a legacy brand in Black insurance. And he's talking to us about what this means for us going forward. Listen, guys, one of the most promising trends that we've been noticing, surveys like the Ariel survey that surveys Black attitudes toward investing, that has discovered that Gen Z, younger African Americans, are leaning into investing and insurance and this whole idea of wealth creation in a very proactive way that wasn't the case for previous generations. Talk about what that means for Mammoth. Talk about what that means for what the company is hoping to accomplish, and what you think that means in general for African Americans as we really try to play a mean game of catch up, given the challenges we faced over the years in terms of our economic progress.
The good part about that question is the proliferation of information. Like, you can find every piece of information about anything you want to know is in your phone. And we find that younger generations are taking advantage of that. If you couple that with the development of products that now make life insurance no longer mortality dependent, and I'll describe what that means. And to your point, Dr. Susan, the nobody wants to have a conversation about their mortality. If they do, they want to have it one time and have it be done and
Yes.
never come back to it again. So we reframe the conversation, especially for younger people, because they're insurance products that are actually investment vehicles that just
Nice.
have a death benefit attached to them. So
Mm.
they're very tax efficient. They look like IRAs, which people are familiar with. So you get the tax-free growth. It actually has a cash value to it. So at any time you can become your own bank and
Nice.
borrow from yourself as opposed to borrow from majority culture banks at exorbitant rates that approach usurious. And at the end of your life, you've had utility of this investment vehicle for 40, 50, 60 years of your life. And there's this wonderful death benefit, which you can leave to your heirs. So
Yes.
we're finding that young people are attaching to that idea. And this is one of the ways that a majority culture wealthy have gotten wealthy and stayed wealthy is by using these vehicles, which were painted as too complicated for the middle class or too complicated for people to understand. They're not. They're not. And now they're available in smaller amounts for people to begin their financial journeys with.
You know,
I
you
love that
you
approach. I
make an
really do.
important. I'm sorry, Dr. Sujay.
Mhm.
You make a very important point that was made for me with one of my friends in financial education, who talked about how what you guys talked about earlier. For so many decades, maybe centuries, insurance was associated with death in Black communities.
Yes.
It wasn't associated with life and opportunities, and I can do this and I can do that. And probably the biggest change with younger generations is that reframing that insurance is more than just making sure you have enough to not have to do a GoFundMe to get buried, that there's so much more you can do. And that mere reframing of it makes it a conversation you want to have. As we said, nobody really wants to talk about the point that they're going to die, even if they know they're going to do it. But everybody wants to talk about opportunity and resources to take advantage of opportunity. And for me, it's something as basic as the emergency fund. The first thing you're told is to save up 6 to 9 months of emergency.
Yes.
But you think of emergency as something bad going wrong. And someone reframed it for me when I was in my early 40s as think of it as an opportunity fund. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, how many times do you had a chance to invest in a business and you didn't have any cash laying around to do it? How many times do you have a chance to put money in the stock market and you're like, well, I would have did it if I had some. And once you reframed it, it became, oh, I need to put this money. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but if something comes up, I have it. And so I want to make that point because so much of this, both in the faith community and in the outside the faith community and the secular community, is about reframing the conversation in a way that recognizes our cultural understanding. Because we hear the word insurance, but depending on where you're from, you don't hear the same thing. You hear the same word, but your reaction to it is different depending on your orientation. And so that's why I just think, Dr. Sujay, you as a faith leader, you are probably even more deeper ensconced in this than I am when you have conversations about the need to reframe, again,
Yes.
the word about be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Exactly. But the word investment was so important that you used, Bryan, because it is an investment. I live in a historically African American community for the summer. And what many of us have begun to do is deed now our homes to our children so that they don't have to wait till we're on that sick bed and, have to try to have that conversation. So what you're doing coupled with that is another investment. And it's exciting to hear. I'm excited about that word. It is reframing the conversation.
That's
I want to
right.
make sure before we still have some time left, but I don't want to lose it. What is the best way for our audience, for the Be Lifted Up audience, to stay up on top of what Mammoth is doing, what you guys may be doing? If we can follow you on social media or there's websites we should go to, both for as Dr. Sujay mentioned earlier, maybe I want to work for Mammoth Life, or I just want to know about the new products and services that are being offered.
Yeah, the best place is our website, which is mammothlife.com. For anything that people have questions about, or if they want to join us and sell insurance policies or see what we're up to. And in fact, we have some bite-sized educational content that goes back into what you just mentioned, which was this the investment piece. And if you had money laying around, you could start a business or take advantage of some opportunity. And on our website, you'll find some educational content that showcases that how McDonald's,
Mm-hmm.
Disney, and Tyson Foods were all companies that were started or saved by a life insurance policy from their founder.
Wow.
Wow.
Right. So
Myself a business historian, and I didn't know about that.
yes, yeah. I mean, I'm a bit of a nerd myself, and it was serendipity around the pandemic when I saw many people that looked like me going hog wild and buying crypto and inflating their Nike shoe collection, right, as a alternative investment. And I'm like, wow, if only they knew life insurance could do the same thing and be a little bit more practical and
Capital efficient.
reliable, right? Capital efficient. It just has to be educated, repackaged, and told that way, and it could be just as sexy as the others. So
I like that phrase you said, if only they knew. So
Yep.
I've got a group of Black women business owners and those thinking about business, and I have a group of young Black ministers who are also thinking about, what do I do? So if only they knew. How do they know, except if I say, go to Mammoth.life? Is there another marketing tool that would reach these audiences?
I really hate to say it, but that's the opportunity that we're filling.
Okay.
There is no one saying this is how you use it. This is what it's for. Instead, it's kind of the picture of your proverbial, older grandma with a young great grandchild saying, "Do you have life insurance?" And it's kind of old, stale, and
Yes.
it does not emote the things out of that messaging that it should, where others can take advantage of life insurance and use it for all the different ways that we've described so far, and many other ways as part of asset protection strategy and other ways as well.
So
Well, I
we're
have
gonna
two
we're gonna
audiences
give
I'll
this
introduce you
the,
to. Yes.
we're gonna give this as the Be Lifted Up audience homework. Everyone, every episode we have an opportunity to give them homework. Pastors, visit mammothlife.com.
Yes.
Familiarize yourself with what's there. You let your spirit move you to what you want to say to your congregation about what's there, but visit it and become knowledgeable about the resources and the information, the education is there. And of course, everybody, because we're all in ministry in one way or another, visit that website, whether it's to look for job opportunities, whether it's to really see what products and services are being offered, but most importantly, so we can spread the word about reorienting ourselves about the value of insurance to our larger goal of closing the wealth gap. So that's your homework, and we do our homework at Be Lifted Up Radio. So, let's make sure we do that. Listen, guys, final thoughts. We got about a minute left. Is there anything you want our audience to leave with? Let's start with Bryan and finish with Paul, real quick.
Yeah, real quick. Thank you for this opportunity. This is fantastic in helping us get the word out. Our company is going to be successful only in partnership with others, right? Only in partnership with others. And we lean very heavily into the historical context of partnership with faith-based institutions because we recognize them as centers of influence. Those are going to be places where we find our best employees and we find the greatest number of folks that we can serve.
We're so happy to have had you. Yes.
Yeah, thanks again for having us. Bryan said it very, very well.
All right, that's a wrap. You guys, thank you for joining us. Looking forward to continuing to follow the journey of Mammoth under your leadership. This is Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. with guest host Dr. Sujay. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Be Lifted Up, your guide to living an abundant life. Dr. Sujay, I just think we had a gem of a conversation on a very important financial institution with two brothers that are really doing the right thing, both as with the faith-based community, but in the larger challenge of financial empowerment in the Black community. What say you?
I say it was a 5-star conversation. We're looking for resorts right now, and a 5-star, 5 diamond, they were gems, definitely 5 diamond. It's about reframing the conversation so people really understand it for this generation, are not afraid of life assurance and reassured. I learned about reorienting the conversation, reframing the conversation, and most of all, to not have reservations about the conversation. There's a resurgence, let's be part of it.
As a faith leader, we also talked about how important it is to not only with this platform, obviously Be Lifted Radio, but faith leaders, yourself and other community leaders getting the word out, because so much of this is about re-education and not just about selling.
Exactly. And faith leaders have to assume the roles we've always had to lead our people, to make sure the conversation gets on the table. But I also know there's some faith leaders who can be part of their team, to actually spread the word and actually have another revenue stream as we go forth. So I think there are many opportunities for partnership and for spreading the word.
Absolutely. Listen, everyone, you just listened to another great episode of Be Lifted Up Radio, your guide to living an abundant life. You can listen to Be Lifted Up Radio at liftedupradio.com. We're also on the Mocha Podcast Network, podcastplural.com. We're on Sirius XM 141 HUR Black Voices. And you can follow us on social media at the letter B, Lifted Up Radio on X, Instagram, or Facebook. Listen, thanks for listening. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. here with guest host Dr. Sujay. We'll see you next time.